Hello again. It is March 17th. Been a long time. Uh, want to thank the subscribers I've received. I didn't expect that. Didn't think my content was warrant of any real attention. A tragedy of sorts happened literally overnight. Um, Two Edmonton police officers were ambushed in a apartment complex. Uh, Now, for those of you who don't know or don't understand, the RCMP is a federal law enforcement agency that covers most of the country, with the exception of Ontario and Quebec. But in Alberta, Edmonton, and Calgary have independent law enforcement agencies. And basically at 1 a.m., grandparents' cat, or my parents' cats. Anyway, at 1 a.m., two officers were basically shot and killed while responding to a family distress. Obviously, these officers were not given the information they required, probably because it was the neighbors who called it in and not the subjects themselves. A 16-year-old who had a firearm of what kind we don't know. The investigation is still ongoing. Shot and killed two officers, shot and wounded his mother in the case, and shot himself, and ended up dying. Who this person was, what their family's attributes were, nobody's reporting, if they're even allowed to. This investigation is brand new, so therefore no one can make proper assumptions on what's going on. This is going to sound cold coming from me, but at the end of the day, something like this, although it's very rare in Canada, is not that unexpected anymore. A culmination of higher regulations, cultural censorship, and frankly, the police being caught between a rock and a hard place most of the time has led to situations like this becoming, if not more common, then at the very least more expected. It's expected to have more of these incidents occur, simply because it doesn't matter how you slice it, eventually you're going to see a lot more of these incidents happening here. At the end of the day, it's not nice. It's certainly not part of Canada most people hear about. But at the end of the day, it is our new reality. Again, there are probably other things that haven't been looked into that need to be looked into. The investigation is still ongoing. It's brand new. But at the end of the day, a combination of police safety awareness, and the harsh reality that the police nowadays have to work in a situation that's actually more dangerous than it was before, simply because of the access to firearms has drastically changed over the years, but more importantly, because the officers themselves are not being trained to do what they would normally do. It's not like the movies. You're not going to see, going to date myself again, you're not going to see a guy like Clint Eastwood pulling out his massive revolver before approaching a door. The Canadian police services, no matter what they are, tend not to do that because they're being trained not to do that. Most RCMP, provincial and city police, have a tendency of talking down their subjects. We saw that in Toronto, where that one guy was, I think, trying to get himself killed via police. And the Toronto police, after stabbing a few people, and the Toronto police officer talked him down before, I think, tasering him. And there have been issues with taserings as well because of the voltage. And this has led to people having heart attacks. It's rare, but it does happen. There was an RCMP case in Vancouver a few years ago where that actually happened. They tasered a guy at the airport and he ended up having a heart attack and died. This is a case where they didn't know what they were walking into. They were given secondhand information, and at the end of the day, it cost them their lives. There's probably a lot of things they could have done differently, but at the end of the day, you can speculate all you want. What matters is you have two officers of the law, two people trying to ensure, and one, as far as from what I understand, had actually been in the Edmonton law enforcement for over 8 years, so he's not a rookie. Basically caught in a situation that they couldn't really respond to. And at the end of the day, it cost them their lives. It's not nice. I'm pretty sure they had families, and if they don't, they probably have people who know them. Not to mention this affects the police overall because it sets a precedence, just like the Marathorpe shootings did, I think 5 or 6 years ago or something like that. So what comes out of this? This is what's more important in most people's opinions, despite the fact that it just happened. Well, to be honest, we're not really sure. Most of the details are not known, despite what news agencies like to say. The Edmonton Police Service is not going to air those details until they've conducted a full investigation. After all, 2 of their own have just been killed, and the shooter killed himself. So the harsh reality is you're not going to be able to get him in an interrogation room and have a chat with him. A lot of people are, especially from the news, are emphasizing the fact this was a 16-year-old boy. I can't help but ask, why is that important? Now again, we don't know the facts of the case, but if I may speculate wildly here, the more important questions that must be asked is, A, why was this 16-year-old in such a mood that they decided to shoot up their own house, shoot their own mother, ambush 2 police officers, and kill himself, all in an apartment complex? It's not exactly easy. 2, he obviously knew the police were coming, or he wouldn't have gotten a drop on them in the first place. This means either his mother called the police or the neighbors did, but we don't know the details, and we probably never will. 3, the firearm was not told to us. We don't know what kind of firearm was used. So as a result, we can only speculate as to how, why, or when the suspect actually got their hands on it. And the final aspect of this is, if the police were ambushed and there's evidence that states that they were, then the question then becomes, how in the future in an apartment complex can the Edmonton Police Services or the RCMP or any law enforcement agency in this country manage to maintain their own safety? Because at the end of the day, they're people too. Now, they go home to their families, they have friends, and they probably like the odd beer on the weekends when they're not at work. The harsh reality of their employment means they pretty much signed up to get abused, shot at, and possibly killed in the line of duty. Again, that sounds harsh to say, and you're not going to see a whole lot of sympathy, because at the end of the day, as tragic as this is what they signed up for. There are a lot of other employable opportunities they probably could have pursued, and this ended up being one of them. Hold on. Apologies for that. Family, what are you going to do? Anyway, hopefully, as more details become more readily available, the police will make a synopsis of their own. Hopefully this won't get twisted in the media, and hopefully the politicians won't use this as an excuse to put even further regulations on what is essentially a partially disarmed nation at this point. After all, at the end of the day, what this turns into is an incident like this can easily become political, which is why I'm making this video. At the end of the day, we do not want people to overemphasize what's actually going to happen, even though that kind of thing is going to happen anyway, and there's not a whole lot we can do about it. This is just how this country works. Politicians have been looking for years to find ways to disarm us, and this is just going to be one more thing they can use. At the same time, the police can only do so much. I mean, the harsh reality is the police have been hit just as hard as everybody else has been in such of these situations. So, as much as this is a terrible ordeal, the harsh reality is that either this ambush was entirely preventable, which I highly doubt, considering there's evidence that they didn't even get shot off, or, simply put, the unfortunate deaths of these officers is basically a price that was paid on the altar of shortchanging the police budget, ensuring the police do not get the resources that they require, and probably more importantly, ensuring that the training that they require to basically keep themselves safe in an urban setting has been completely thrown out the window in favor of progressive, how shall I put this, politely yet bluntly, basically to use their voices rather than their billy clubs. At the end of the day, it didn't help these two officers, and at the end of the day, as this cultural upheaval that we've been seeing in this country get worse and worse and worse, it's probably going to be a continuous problem for law enforcement. Now again, and I can't stress this enough, we simply don't know enough about this. It literally only happened at 1 a.m. today. So the harsh reality is that I can sit here and speculate till the cows come home, but until we know the exact prominence of what happened, exactly what the investigation unfolded, which we won't know for weeks, the Edmonton Police Service is not going to issue a broadband investigative statement until they know absolutely everything that happened. And by the sounds of it, that's not going to be an easy thing to do. They're going to be looking at secondhand information. The suspect is dead. He killed himself. So as a result, there's no way of getting answers from that. And despite the fact the news keep reiterating he's 16, well, that either means one of two things. Either this teenager was off his rocker to begin with, which I don't know because no one knows anything about him, or probably more realistically, it's been a long way coming and the kid vented in the most terrible way possible. But you also have to look at 16 years old isn't really a kid. This teenager should have known the consequences of his actions, at least by any standard metric of societal cultural requirements. So again, we don't know enough about what's going on in order to make an actual legitimate statement, which makes me wish the news would stop making generalized statements until we actually know everything that can be known after the investigation is complete. Anyway, that's all I have to say on the matter. Again, a tragedy. Hasn't happened very often. Hopefully it doesn't happen too much in the future. And unfortunately, the police, which are our civil service guys, they are the guys who are our first and last line of defense when it comes to civil authority. Like I said, they're put between a rock and a hard place. In my opinion, they have one of the worst jobs in this country. Because it doesn't seem to matter what they do or where they go. They're either getting shit on or they're getting yelled at. Either way, it's never any good for them. And these two guys paid the ultimate price for the ignorance of politicians who don't seem to understand that sometimes you do got to put another zero on the check. Anyway, that's all I got to say about that.